And the last deputant that we have, Rob Laidlaw. Good afternoon, sir. Thank you for waiting. The floor is yours. You have 5 minutes. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Rob Laidlaw. I'm Executive Director of Zoocheck, a Toronto-based animal protection organization. I've been involved in these issues for the last 39 years, including many dozens and dozens of similar kinds of bylaw discussions and debates. I'm a former Humane Society inspector, a biologist. My sister works with autistic kids, and I know a lot of teachers. The first thing I'd want to say is I want to congratulate staff on trying to flesh out some of the issues with regard to exotic animals. It's not an easy task, and I think they've done an admirable job. I also want to say that my organization, Zoocheck, supports both recommendations in the report. And further to that, we strongly urge you not to recommend any exemptions to the bylaw. We don't think it's appropriate. Just a couple of comments in response to what's been said early. I'd like to say that education of kids in Toronto is not reliant on having a prohibited kangaroo, camel, python, skunk, or porcupine in the room with the kids. If it was, then most kids wouldn't be educated. I also wanted to point out that nobody here today is talking about a complete ban on all animal interaction of all kinds, and I think that's been suggested in some of the commentary that's been provided. And furthermore, the reality is that the businesses that are here saying they need an exemption can continue to deliver their programs without prohibited animals. And there are many operators that actually don't use any animals at all, like Down to Earth Conservation Education. It's been around for 30 years. They do fantastic programs. Or the Kindness Club that only uses domesticated dogs. Now, I wanted to just talk about a couple of things in the body of the report. Toronto and this committee, I think, should go a little bit further than the report suggests. While certainly we appreciate the recommendation to add penguins, cranes, and flamingos to the prohibited animals list, we certainly support that. We think that the city should go a little bit further. And I would encourage this committee to take one further step by directing that staff prepare a report to review the benefits of a positive list, also known as a permitted animals list approach in the City of Toronto. Now, several people have mentioned positive lists, and I wanted to just tell you a little bit about them to provide some clarification. The main difference between a positive list and a prohibited list is that the positive list has a set of predetermined criteria, such as those outlined in the staff report, that have to be satisfied before an animal is allowed in the city. If those criteria are not satisfied, then the animals are not allowed. It's very simple. In contrast, a prohibited list allows everything until a problem is identified, usually a safety problem, and then the animal species is dealt with in some capacity. So the two are diametrically opposite in how they're structured. Now, with a positive list, if the criteria are very weak or few in number, let's take, for example, just public safety, then your positive list will be very, very large. But if there are more criteria, such as those being suggested in the staff report, and they're stronger, then the positive list will be very, very small. And I'll give you an example of a couple of positive lists. Someone mentioned earlier the country of Belgium. Well, they underwent a positive list approach a number of years ago. Belgium has just 42 species of mammals that are approved for keeping by private individuals. Just 42, not hundreds, not thousands, just 42. If you look at a recent convert to the positive list regime, that's the country of Norway, they've created a positive list for reptiles. They only have 19 species of reptiles that are allowed. It's a lot easier to deal with what is going to be allowed than to look at everything that isn't allowed and try to sift through all of those species, because if you have a prohibited list and you expand your criteria like is proposed in the staff report, then potentially you have thousands of species that could be candidates for being added to the prohibited list. Toronto Animal Services can't do a proper analysis for those species and decide which ones are on the prohibited list. It's far, far better to use a positive list and look at far fewer species. And setting up a cost and labor-effective process to assess the comparatively small number of species that will be brought forward under a positive list system won't be very difficult at all. And in fact, the assessment work for a broad range, hundreds of species, has already been done in these other jurisdictions. So for those reasons,
Thank you,
I
sir.
encourage you to request that staff report back with an analysis of the
Thank you.
benefits of a positive
Any
list.
questions for the deputant? If not, thank you.